I'm here with Mick Winship, CTO of AVL North America. And we also have Guillermo here, who's globally responsible for AVL Racing, or as we call it now, Race Tech. So very exciting to have both of you here. Racing certainly is a growing area in AVL globally, but something that we've done in Europe for many, many years. And recently we changed our name to Race Tech to really highlight technologies we have in this space. So one thing, Mick, I want to start out with is we have a lot of turnkey solutions, obviously in racing. But what's the difference between technologies we offer for racing and technologies we offer for, let's say, the rest of the mobility space?
So there are quite a lot of similarities, but there are differences, and probably the biggest difference is driven by speed. In racing, you have season-to-season changes in car design, and regulations change pretty much every year. You will have within season if there's a failure or something needs changing. So speed is everything in racing, not just on the track, but in the development process because it's tight, and it doesn't matter whether it's IndyCar or F1, particularly F1. It's the same issue. So you have a lot more reliance, I think, put on simulation because development times are short. You have to get as much as you can get done outside of the track. So yeah, certainly a lot of speed. Different uses of simulation, perhaps in passenger car world or consumer product world, very complicated tool chains to be able to model things. That's not as efficient for racing if we have to go department to department. So you tend to streamline some of that. A lot of emphasis on cloud computing technology. You're generating a lot of data. Yep. Got to be able to store that data. When we run VSM for lap time simulation, we're running thousands and thousands of laps. That's a lot of data. And also speed, because you've got all the processing power of the cloud. So probably more work gets done in the cloud in race applications than in consumer product. Yeah.
Guillermo, we talked about when I was just in Graz, you guys did a great demo for me and for others on the racing simulator, right? An amazing technology that we've really fine-tuned, that a lot of racing teams and race drivers are using. And clearly the speed that Mick just talked about is super critical, not just in the development, but clearly on the track. How does this all tie into why the racing simulator that we have is so critical?
Yeah, like just mentioned, the speed of development, we call it rate of development. How fast can you develop, no? Sometimes you start the season not in the best way, but your engineering capabilities allow you an amazing rate of development to catch up and be competitive. So the driving simulator or driver in the loop, it is another tool into this rate of development that helps to model-based development of your solutions and test it and add a very important factor into this, the human, the driver. Don't forget, at the end, it's a human sitting in a car for the moment, no? Even if you have beaten autonomous driving, you still will be a human be driven. You need to add the human into the equation, and the driving simulator, obviously the best tool, where you can try many different technical solutions in advance. Like you said again, you want to reach the track with the most close to efficient vehicle. You have little time, not much time to develop, so you need to develop quick, and the driving simulator is a tool that allows you to try the solution with a real driver before going to the track.
Okay. I would also add to that some of the regulations that have come into the racing sport drive innovative solutions like that. So the limited amount of track time you can have at F1, now you want to practice off track on the driving simulator. Yeah. So the regulations are really driving and pushing innovative solutions and technology.
Look into the regulations. You need to be obviously legal, but you need to find these loopholes on the regulation to take advantage. And everything can be tested virtually. And of course, driving simulators are a very, very powerful tool for this.
Yeah. Okay. So AVL, Mick, is involved obviously not just with traditional powertrain in racing, but also on more the alternative electric vehicle, fuel cell maybe in the future, hydrogen potentially, lots of different things. But you have a lot of different powertrain development programs at AVL. What is the most important difference between powertrain for a race car and powertrain for a, let's say, passenger vehicle? I mean, I'm talking weight. Again, clearly speed obviously is a whole lot more important on a racetrack than on a car that I drive or you drive or Guillermo drives in Graz. But what are the big differences or the big key focus areas?
So the boundary conditions and what you're designing for are very different. So on the track, you're designing for performance. You need power, you need a lot of torque, and durability. And races are very short. Maybe a F1 race is an hour and a half. So you perhaps, and with the lifetime of two to three races, you're designing for maybe 6, 8, 10 hours, which is a very different design practice than 150,000 mile cars. So the rules and regulations and the needs are very different. Cars are, in the passenger car world or commercial world, we're not just designing for performance, but we're designing for noise. You want to be quiet, you want to be comfortable. That's not such a big issue in Formula One or any of the race series. So you've got fuel economy is different. We have to worry about fuel economy. We have different regulations. In the car, you perhaps it's very specified to a wing size, wing design, very dimensionally driven. You in the passenger car, you're designing for the end consumer. Can I sell this? Do I design something attractive enough? And the two things are all trying to solve the same physics, but you have different boundary conditions and different target groups that you're looking for. So weight, stiffness, performance, all very important in racing. Durability, and getting durability right. You're designing for a limited life, so you want to be light, it needs to be strong enough, it needs to be crash-worthy. Crash is very important, obviously, in F1. So.
Guillermo, if I ask you quickly, because the Le Mans race, the 24-hour race in Europe was just a few weeks ago, what do we have to do different from an AVL perspective when we design something? Okay, and I'll leave it wide open on purpose. What's the biggest difference for a 24-hour race versus for a race that Mick just mentioned? It's an hour and a half, 2.5 hours. I mean, Le Mans, you have probably, you drive in the heat of the day, you drive when it gets cool, you may have rain in between, you have all sorts of different things. So what challenges that bring that we at AVL have to address with our racing team partners?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, 24-hour Le Mans is the endurance race. You need to guarantee that your powertrain lasts at least one lap more than the finish line. Okay, no more than this. And the challenge, obviously, getting the performance, constant performance. The car is the engine, the powertrain is drivable, so the driver is not fighting or wrestling with the car. And of course, endurance. You need to keep the performance in such a long race, and that's something completely different from 1.5 hour sprint race. One of the challenges, as you mentioned, as Le Mans is changing very much, the weather sometimes is very cold, very hot, cooling. So when you do the packaging, you must consider the cooling is a challenge. So especially today with the new regulations that the cars are hybrids, you need to guarantee the cooling conditions for any of the environmental conditions. And you don't know in advance if you will have 35 degrees or 5 degrees. I've been in 2008, where in the night was 4 degrees, and during the day it reached about 30. So cooling requirements are very different. And you need this to take into consideration. So it's not that simple, and you design actually a car for very changing weather conditions. Imagine now, especially hybrid car LMDH in America, LMH in Europe, you will have all the brake bag wires. The brakes are carbon, and also they will brake in such a big different temperatures, and you will need to consider in your powertrain, your electronics, your controller, all these conditions. So yeah, it is a challenge, to be efficient in all these conditions. Obviously, there are sacrifices.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mick, we do a lot of simulation tools. You mentioned it before. What is the most important simulation tool that we use at AVL for racing? For what component do we use that simulation?
That they're all important. It does vary by race series. So in IndyCar, the chassis is specified for you. So everybody gets the same chassis. So Aero CFD is probably not as important in IndyCar because there's not much you can do. You can maybe do some optimization and slight tweaks. But all tools are very important. Vehicle dynamics is perhaps the most important because once you've got the chassis sorted out now, it's really about tuning and optimization, getting wing settings right and so on. So probably vehicle dynamics is important, but it will vary by race series because different series have different needs and different regulations.
And what's the most important specific racing simulation technology that we have that is not necessarily used for the rest of the mobility space where we heavily rely on simulation technology? But what specific AVL race tech simulation tool do we use for some of these things?
So we have developed a lap time optimization tool. So that's very strong, very powerful. We have had that tool for years. It's based off our VSM vehicle dynamics tool, but we morphed it from just looking at street car and suspension and kinematic issues into a lap time simulation. So that's very powerful. We run it in the cloud. We run thousands and thousands of simulations so the track can go to the car, as Guillermo said, as optimized as it can. So you're doing minimum changes at the track. So that's probably one of the most important.
So that can be for testing the technology, but also testing or optimizing how the driver drives, true?
It helps the driver because we can take that vehicle simulation tool and run it as a desktop simulation. We can use that as integrated into the driver in the loop so that we're able to use it both ways. So, yeah.
Okay.
And I think the other side benefit of racing is a lot of these technologies we can then also bring back into the consumer world. So everything that we've developed in terms of being able to run simulation in the cloud, we've applied now to ADAS simulation. ADAS simulation takes a lot of scenarios. There's thousands of miles and kilometers to run. We've morphed and leveraged everything we developed for cloud computing for race tech into consumer product. Same with the driving simulator. F1 or IndyCar or whoever use it for driving and getting familiar with the track and tuning settings. We've also taken the driver in the loop into vehicle calibration so that you can do seat comfort and so on. So a lot of technologies from racing have now fed their way back into the consumer product.
Okay. Guillermo, where do we see race technology evolving going forward? I know it's probably going to be even more simulation, more exactly what Mick just talked about. How can we not only improve the technology, but how can we help the drivers become more, well, let's just say, become faster, right? Increase speed. But where do you see the technology go?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this a couple of days ago. First time fast, so you would like when the prototype reached the track, you are closer to optimum. So you want to be fast and you want just to minor tuning your controllers, your suspension, your car setup to optimize the car. So the tools start to be more and more complex to be able to simulate the full system. It's a full vehicle system simulation where take into consideration effects like cooling, tires, tire degradation, tire temperature, and obviously more and more into the electrification or hybridization. And we are pushing in this direction, so develop more accurate battery models with the thermal influence, e-motors, even fuel cells. So currently we are also updating our models that will be able to run fuel cells. So it gives the possibility to the customer to explore different technical solutions. And this is, again, transferred to the commercial side, to the, let's say, road legal vehicles, because we need to be accurate, very quick, and also very easy to understand results, like you mentioned. We are doing 200, 300,000 simulations per race weekend for one category in particular, and also develop a visualization tool that help you to take a quick decision based on simulation. And all these methodologies are also transferred to our cousins, let's call it, from the road legal. Obviously, development on electrification is a big push at the moment. And again, then it's a software fight, as you may know, maybe Formula E, but all Formula One, Le Mans, you need to use this electric energy in a very efficient way. So we need to create, we call it energy solvers, that allow you to use this energy in the most efficient way. Again, this can be transferred to road legal vehicles straight away, no?
Okay. And then maybe Mick, last question for you. Besides all the developments that we've seen in racing, right? I mean, connectivity is a big thing, artificial intelligence with figuring out what's the best configuration, what tires, temperature, all these different things that now are not human-based anymore, but heavily computer or AI-based. What do you see the biggest changes in development over the years that happens? Maybe let's just say specifically powertrain, right?
I think certainly the regulations in the sports have driven a lot of those changes. So increasing degrees of electrification in certain race series all the way to Formula E where it's full. Technology has to adapt and change. You can have this feature or you can't have that feature. So I think it's a incremental change every year because the rules incrementally change and you're moving closer and closer to an optimum. Technologies on the simulation side have changed. I think the next two big things are data, because now you have all of this simulation. You've got to be able to interpret it quickly. You've got to be able to visualize it quickly in the office or track side. And then I think the next big change is perhaps more with biomechanics and bio-related technologies to help driver fatigue. What are the forces on the driver? How is the driver going to absorb that? That's perhaps an adaptation of the drive tool that we can look at. But I think that will come into it, because it's not just about endurance of the race car, it's also about endurance of the driver at the end of the day.
Yeah. Takes a big toll out of the driver. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Guillermo, in Europe for your time today. Thank you, Mick, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, great. Thanks to be part of this.
Thanks for listening to Reimagine Mobility Podcast. If you like this episode, please subscribe and tell a friend.